Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for waiting. My name's Z. I'm the owner and director here at Soul Strategies. Just to let you guys know a little bit about who we are as an organization before we get started. We are a political organization that works specifically with no corporate money candidates to help them get elected. So a big part of what we do here at Soul, even though we do a lot of different pieces of campaigning, is that we really focus on our field programs and our field strategy. And that's just because we really believe that you have to knock every door to win the war. So tonight we're going to be doing a presentation for you guys and just a real honest conversation about how to run a powerful persuasion campaign that actually wins. So we have a lot of elections happening in New York. We are coming to you from our field office here in New York City in downtown Manhattan. And we know that there are other primaries that are just around the corner, some of them being Detroit. We're going to be working in Boston and other places. So we just wanted to give you guys an overview of what that looks like. And to introduce our field team here, we're still waiting on Lori, who's going to be joining us shortly. She's actually stuck in traffic coming back from the field tonight, because as we said, we are in the middle of election season, so we're super busy. But this is Ryan over here, this is Dan, and this is Amir. So we're going to get started.
Who we are. So just a little bit about Soul, as Z had mentioned. We create powerful, people-powered, progressive campaigns across the United States. And we're built by real field organizers who are passionate about the progressive movement. We are the opposite of consultants. We are people who come from the street, who come from the doors. We are field people at heart, who take our values and our morals and actually execute them in the movements that we advance. That is why we do politics with Soul here at Soul.
So one of our accomplishments is partnering with the Drivers Cooperative. So what they do is they drive people out to the polls and make voting more accessible, along with other groups that we work with. We work with a bunch of progressive orgs throughout the nation. Yeah, that's one of our major partnerships. And persuasion campaigns are powerful shit. People are 7 times more likely to get out to vote when somebody knocks on their door and asks them to. And that's simply because people are turned off by politics sometimes. People are unaware of elections. So when you have somebody knocking on your door, making that commitment to come out and speak with you about something they care about, it impacts them emotionally. And that's why they are driven out to the polls. We really emphasize that a personal, emotional, effective conversation is how we get people out to the polls on election day, and early voting and absentee ballots as well.
So what is canvassing? On the basic surface level, canvassing is in-person interaction within a neighborhood or a constituency with members of the community in representation of a candidate. There are many different types of canvassing, but today we're going to focus mainly on Persuasion GOTV walk programs. That is by far the most frequent and occurring type of campaign that is happening right now in the field. I know many of you who are on the call right now are right in the middle of your GOTV walk program. So a big part of this is just going to give you the tips and tricks to tighten up and use the insight that we have from our careers in order to help guide you in your way. Because right now it's silly season right now. Things are hectic, things are rough. We just want to take an opportunity to pump the brakes a little bit and to check in and just go over best practices on how to roll out a winning campaign.
So why we canvass? We need to get out the message, whatever your platform is, hopefully progressive ideals, whether it be public health care, environmentalism, affordable housing. Your message is what we convey to the voters in your district. And that's why we canvass, because without us speaking with people on an individual basis, you can run as many ads as you want. You're not going to see as many people going to the polls as you would if you had field operations going on. And then again, it builds your name recognition within a community. It builds trust within the community, especially if the candidate and their personal team is out there as well alongside us or running their own volunteer operation. So what does powerful field look like? Powerful field is collecting powerful data. So when we're in the field and we are canvassing, we collect data in real time and it's updated and uploaded to whichever application that you guys are using for your campaign. So you get that data in real time and you can adjust where need be very quickly. So that's why we emphasize our canvassers getting that data and inputting it correctly, only inputting data from the people they speak with. So for example, if somebody's wife answers the door and they say, my husband is also going to be voting for you, we only input that data from the wife because we don't even know if the husband exists. A lot of crazy stuff happens in field and we make sure that our canvassers are well trained in getting that data into your hands as effectively, as quickly, and accurately as possible. So training smart canvassers. At Soul, we train all the canvassers that we hire. They go through a 2-hour training where they have to pass a persuasion exam and a petitioning exam. So perfecting their pitch, getting people to be strategic when they're out there on the field, knocking on doors in an efficient pattern to maximize their the time that they're out there and optimize the results that you're getting. Our canvassers are the top of the top because of that training that we do. And they play an active role in memorizing and learning the turf that they're on as they learn about that turf, hiring people from the, or as close to as possible, the turf that we will be canvassing so that they know the area better, they know the people better, and also reading up on your website. We also have a in-person or via Zoom meeting with the candidate and their team on the first shift with all the canvassers that stay on your project so they get used to you and they can ask you any questions. We want to make sure that they are best prepared out there to convey your platform to your voters. And the other thing our canvassers are trained at is making sure they know a few at least, if not most of your policies, so that when they're out there, they can tailor pitches to different demographics in field. A pitch for an 18-year-old voter is going to be most likely different than a pitch for somebody who's 80. People care about different issues, so our canvassers are trained to understand all the issues that you focus on in your candidacy.
What canvassers should be looking for? So a smart canvasser goes out and knows that they're not just looking for an open pair of ears to read a random script to. They are in the field, they have adopted fully the operative mentality, and they are playing the game of politics with us. So what voter demographics respond to which issues, for example, is something that canvassers should be testing on their own door to door. When they're walking one neighborhood or one type of demographic, for example, older people, they might see how the candidate's healthcare stance tests at those doors, as opposed to social justice or free education at younger doors. That is something that canvassers should be able to do on their own. They should have the mentality and be trained to look at the turf and look at the constituency within it through that lens. Another good question that they should be asking themselves is what neighborhoods and turfs are working better for us at what times. They're the ones who are receiving both the not homes and the contacts. They're the ones who are out there for the entire duration of the shift as we move around the geography of the turf. And really, they're the only people who could possibly give us the insight as to whether or not we are even canvassing at the right time. A lot of canvassers might take a day where they have tons of not homes and say that's a good day at work. But a smart canvasser takes a day where there's a lot of not homes and says we're not going to win if we keep on canvassing this way. And really, whether or not they get to that end question is foundational to the training that they get. What is the goal that they're trying to achieve when they're going out and hitting the doors? Is it just to repeat a script? Is it just to be sort of like a robotic human advertisement? Which brings me to the point that good canvassers are not just paid volunteers. They're not just people to go out and show some sort of artificial support. Instead, they understand politics and they're mindful and aware of things like their candidate's strengths and weaknesses in certain places. They're mindful and aware of the opposition. They're also mindful and aware of the changing goals of the field program within the context of the race. So like an example would be like in New York, early voting started this week. So a lot of scripts change, a lot of approaches change. That is something that canvassers should be ahead of. Canvassers should know that this is happening. They should know that this is happening because they should be invested in the job that they're doing, but they should also know that this is happening because the coaches and trainers around them, the field captains around them, are constantly tweaking their approach, constantly checking in with them, giving them updates on what's going on. They also should be mindful of effective walking strategies and techniques. I think that's something that I like to tell all my canvassers, that we get better every shift, whether we know it or not, because we get used to walking the turf, we get used to walking the geography, but they don't get better unless they do it intentionally, unless they really think about it, right? So that's just some things that smart canvassers should be looking for.
So helping canvassers find their perfect pitch, again, as I mentioned earlier, all of our canvassers get that opportunity to meet the candidate and also their team, their staff, and ask questions, hear directly from them about what platform is specific to your campaign, as well as go through your website and read up on you, learn about the person that's running personally their personal life as well as their platform. So in their perfect pitch, there is not one perfect pitch. There's many. So again, depending on what demographic that our canvassers are speaking with, they're going to tailor that pitch to that demographic. And they can do that because they have been trained as well as learned about specific ideas and policies that you would be putting in place through their research. So a good pitch, though, a better than good pitch, is an emotional pitch. It's concise, it's informative, and it makes that connection with the voter. It doesn't appear artificial because they have researched and they have been working on their pitch, practicing their pitch before they even speak to the first voter on their first shift. It's rehearsed, and it doesn't feel that way though. It feels genuine because we tailor them specific to the audiences that we're speaking with.
Just some important rules to employ, door-to-door best practices. Knock on every door, even if you don't see the lights on or a car in the driveway, you knock. That is something that is vital to Soul. We knock, we go find people where they are. Be patient. Some people take longer to get to the door. I think for many of us who started as canvassers and built their way into a career, managing and running canvases, we all have encountered the canvas partners who do the little 3-second knock and then run down the driveway. That is obviously antithetical to good field. And also a good thing is to make sure that we're inputting data correct. The conversations don't matter unless we bring the data from them home. And that starts with training, because canvassers need to know the difference between not home and inaccessible. That matters to us, right? If it didn't matter, it wouldn't be an industry option. It wouldn't be something that we look at. It wouldn't be something that we track. It's great to track it. If you're using, apps like Minivan, it's great to have those options loaded in Minivan. But unless we train our canvassers as to what they mean and how to fit those definitions, as to, contacts and categorizing, not homes, it doesn't really matter. It starts with training.
And we teach that we do not solicit we canvass. So there's no illegal dropping lit in mailboxes or on cars. It's wedged in a door frame, or if you have a fancy door hanger on the doorknob. So when we're leaving lit, we're also making sure that we treat it with care, because it is your lit and you have paid for it. It's expensive. It can be $1 to $2.50 per item. So not leaving 2-3 pieces of lit or dropping things, losing things. We're always handling them with care and learning about what's actually on the lit before we hand them off to somebody, so we can walk them through it and then give it to them if a person does answer.
We are extremely emphasis on prioritizing safety here at Soul Strategies. Like I said, we're more than just trying to build canvases, we're trying to build relationships as well too. So we do have a buddy system that we like to implement. We have canvassers working with each other, not just necessarily that say we do value independence, we definitely do value safety as well too. We've been working in different areas, different places. So we canvass public houses, private houses, as well as public buildings and private buildings. Not to say, like I said, we don't value independency, but it's also a great way to work with other canvassers as well too. I mean, you're able to do a whole 20-story building. One person can do 20 to 10, while the other person does 9 to 1. You guys combine the data together, and it's way fun to do that as well too. Different buildings, different areas within safety reasons have different demographics. So some you might have to focus on, but for older audience, just like how Dan was saying earlier. Some you have to focus on a bit of a younger audience. Some places also have different languages. So, you working by yourself, it's a bit hard to do all that work for. It's a bit hard for you to do that all by yourself. So you have a partner to be able to help you do that thing.
So now we're going to go through just like the phases of a standard GeoTV canvas, starting from a week before to the moment that your canvassers come back to the meeting point. So first, it would obviously start with a week of prep and organization. Then, of course, the most tense moment of any canvas is the rollout. The reason why we show up is for data collection, and the reason why you as a canvas leader show up is to supervise. And then finally, we always bring it back home with a conversation, and that's our daily debrief.
Yeah, and keep in mind these phases or stages overlap in some areas. So the data collection, again, is happening in real time as the rollout is happening. So we can adjust accordingly where need be as fast as possible.
So the week before your program, it should be slow and methodical. It reminds me of a saying that I've been told in politics since I started. Somebody sat me down once. They said, "Ryan, you're way too rushed. You are a fast quarter person, and what you need to be is a slow dollar person." Canvassing and field programs are all about getting your slow dollar. The time that you invest in your foundation, the time that you invest in your preparation, all pays off on the back end when the data comes back and the canvassers come back with what we call anecdotal polling almost of on this block and on that block we had this reaction and that reaction. It all starts with familiarizing yourself with the turf. For example, establishing a meetup point, knowing the walkability of the turf from the vantage of a canvasser. I think that a week before your canvas, you should take a few days and not just drive out to the turf that you're going to be walking on. Park up, get out on the sidewalk, and walk around. Discover that hill that you discover when you make a right turn off Main Street that nobody sees from the light, right? But that your canvassers are going to be trekking up, and that's going to make their time to roll out to turf, another 15 minutes. You can't discover that unless you walk it. You should also get to know the constituency. Of course, like voter demographics are available to all of us, but you don't get to know a constituency unless you get out on the sidewalk and talk to people like your canvassers are going to be doing. I would never send canvassers out to do something that I myself haven't done. Another thing is researching your candidate, because if you have invested canvassers, on the first day, you as a field operative are going to be grilled on the person who you're not really representing personally, right? But you're going to be grilled on the person who you're rolling canvassers out to represent, right? So you should be an expert on that person. Your workers, you should get vital information to the workers about the candidate and the program. They should show up on the first day completely informed and ready to pitch a voter. And you should confirm and commit their times and days so as to not run into the fateful day that we always run into, in which nobody shows up. I think that it's important to sit down and have a conversation with everyone and say, look, in the field, we work hard, days off happen, you have doctor's appointments. Tell me now, what's going on? What's going on a week from now? What's going on 2 weeks from now? What days are you going to miss? So you can plan to bring those bodies in for coverage. Because nobody wants to be the field director who's standing on the corner at a meetup point with a box of lit and a laptop in their hand and no bodies. That is a horrible feeling. It's a horrible situation to be in. And just having a simple conversation with everyone individually a week before you start could really remedy that.
Yeah, and then 24 hours before, really this should be crossing your T's and dotting your I's, not rushing. That's why we brought up what happens a week before prior to this slide. So confirming for a second or maybe even a third time that the canvassers that you are getting out there for that shift and for all future shifts are actually prepared and actually going to show up on time and to the turf. Having all of your turfs pre-cut and list numbers completely generated so that we can roll out as smoothly as possible. The prep work that the candidacy is doing before the actual rollout is vital. So it's not just it's not a one-way street. The canvassers and the canvassing team need to have all of the data formatted as organized as possible so that they can be most efficient when they're actually out there. And that happens from the prep work. checking the weather. So if it's going to be torrential rain out there, maybe it's a good idea to look up what large residential buildings canvassers can be going to, so that they can be indoors and they're not getting lit wet or having trouble navigating. Also, having literature stacked and bundled, prepare walk packers, and get plenty of rest yourself if you can before your first shift, because field walking around for hours gets exhausting. So you want to make sure that you personally are prepped as well to go out there.
Rolling out your canvassers. So as the leader, you want to get to the meetup point first and make sure that you are visible. You're not at the meetup point if you pulled up to the meetup point and you're still sitting in your car. You got to stand out there, grab your lit, make yourself known, look for canvassers, start calling people. The faster that you get the group together, the faster you get everyone out. You should also have an abundance of supplies. You should pack 10 pens per canvasser, even though they're never going to use them all. 50 masks per canvasser and plenty of water for everyone. You should never run out of supplies in the field as the field director. Your canvassers are coming to you out there in the wilderness for support. They need pens, masks, water. They need anything that they might need to get through the day. And you're the only person out there on turf that they can come to. I think far too often we feel that a good rollout is one that happens as fast as possible. And that's just not the truth. When canvassers take the time to plan their walks out and really like spend the time in investing, how am I going to execute this walk? What is the first half of my shift going to look like? What's the last half of my shift going to look like? We not only do we get better data because canvassers aren't stressed and frustrated in the field trying to figure things out, we also get more data because an efficient walk is in essence a better walk. I really don't care how quickly they get out. Obviously, like I don't want my canvassers sitting around for, a half hour to 40 minutes after the shift starts. But if they take that 5-10 minutes to really sit there and be methodical about their walk, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, and also just remember canvassers are people too, just like your voters are. So if you have a distraught canvasser walking out to doors because they're dehydrated and you weren't prepared with supplies, they're not going to be able to get that message across as well as they would otherwise, and also voters will notice. And also keep in mind, if you're running for office, the canvassers who are working for you or are volunteering, whichever, they probably live in the area as well, and you'll be representing them. So treat them fairly.
During your canvas, supervision and management. Supervision is vital to your canvas, your data, and your campaign. As field captain, field director, canvas leader for your team, whatever you want to call yourself, really you should look at yourself as more of a coach. You should be out there pushing them, making sure that they beat their records, inspiring them to beat their records. And at the same time, you should also be refereeing and making sure that, for example, they're never off turf, that if they are coming up short in their stats, you are actually, having a conversation, not about, not one that is, penal or that, is shaming your canvasser, but really what is stopping you from being able to achieve your full potential as a canvasser. Really, that is what we do. As field directors, our number one job is to get into the canvasser, get into the person, and drag the community activist that is in all of us out, right? And we do that by checking in and saying, what stopped you from getting to the people today? What stopped you from getting the message out? Those check-ins are so important. As a supervisor, each canvas team or individual should see you at least once during the shift. And it really should be multiple times that they see you. They should definitely hear from you 3 to 4 times. You should spend most of your shift either on your phone or running to where you think canvassers are or where you last left them. Supervising field is like herding cats. It is very hard. You let them out at a drop-off point, and by design, they all walk in different directions, right? You should actually be really busy trying to herd those cats during your canvas. And there's no kind of supervision that is better than rolling up on 2 people as they were walking down a driveway and they realize that you just heard their whole conversation. You should be out there on the sidewalk like a person who can hear their conversation, not somebody who is waving at them from a car. You should always also use a metric. Whatever the metric is, whatever your campaign's goals are, have a metric. Have something to compare yesterday to today. Have something to establish as a trackable goal for tomorrow, whether that's attempts or contacts, distance traveled. If you're doing, for example, a visibility play where you're just, firing random people, that is something that you can track distance on. But have a metric, just so that way you can A, rate your day, B, rate your canvassers for the day, and rate yourself, rate your own rollout, and see whether or not you did well. You need to have a comparable.
Again, you want to make sure you're not discouraged if the first shift doesn't turn out to be your best shift, because you haven't made those adjustments yet, and you should maintain some level-headedness so that canvassers and everyone you're communicating with who ran that shift that day don't feel discouraged themselves, and they're better prepared than they were the day before for the next shift.
Remember to be human. I feel like somewhere within the course of the last, maybe 10, 15 years, and it's like within my own career, which is shorter than that, but within my career, I have been able to ascertain that humanity and community have left the administrative part of canvassing. It has left the mentality of field directors. Canvassers deserve breaks, and you should support them when they take them. You should always ask them how you can best support them in the field, because even though you may think you know everything about canvassing, you may not know everything about that canvas. And those guys are out there hitting doors. They're out there struggling. They're out there hitting the obstacles. You should actually ask them what the nature of those obstacles are. Make them feel heard. You should keep your workers motivated. I like to employ a coaching mentality. I like to kind of establish a system where people are focused on beating their own records, where there's friendly competition between canvassers. That camaraderie really makes the day go smoother. They're out there sweating in the heat right now. At least if things are light, if things are fun, if they're racing each other. I would rather canvassers, race each other to the door to drop lit than race each other off turf to like the nearest McDonald's to sit and, waste out the rest of their shift because their boss sucks. Be mindful of the weather, of course. It's hot, it's rainy, it's muggy, it's humid. It is not pleasant out there all the time. You may not be outside on the street as much as your canvassers are during a shift. You may spend time in the car. You may have an opportunity, depending on how you manage personally, you may have an opportunity to take a little break yourself. Your canvassers don't always have that. So just be mindful of the job that you're asking them to do. And again, check in constantly. And whether or not those check-ins go over well is up to how you approach your canvassers. Because if you're checking in from a place of accountability, your canvassers are going to feel like you're parenting them. But if you're checking in from a place of care and support, your canvassers are going to feel like you're working with them, not like they're working for you. And that is very important to establish on a field team.
And the debrief is where you get to optimize your next shift. You get to speak with canvassers directly, and a good field director or captain out there is going to communicate with the canvassers, gather notes and specific examples from the day, and then they can personally communicate back to the staff so it's more efficient. So in that way, we get to realize where and when is best to canvass and what is really resonating with voters versus what isn't. Where have other candidates been? Because you do have opponents in this race. That's why you have a field team running. So you get to figure out what's actually going on in that debrief. The first one is going to be the most important one, but they run smoother as you have more and more of them. And then ask questions of the canvassers. The candidate might want to ask questions of the canvassers so that when the candidate is out there, they can also communicate with voters better, because there's more eyes and more ears on the canvassing team than that candidate has, and they get to see more things. So yeah, communicate.
So this time we would like to open up to any members of the audience who have questions on what we do, any questions about the slides that you saw, anything that we didn't cover. If there's any burning things that we can answer, please, now would be the time.
Can they unmute themselves as well? Or?
Hey, I've got a question for you. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, now we can.
Awesome. Great presentation. I love it. Very organized. My question is around the size of the campaign and what kind of size of canvassing team you would expect. I'm running a very small campaign. So just wondering, how many to put on the team?
Can we actually ask you a question before we answer yours?
Sure.
Yeah, so where are you running and for what position?
Yeah, so I'm running for Bothell City Council, which is a city in Washington State. It's a bit northeast of Seattle, and I'm running for position 1.
How many opponents do you have?
I have 1, so I get to fly by that primary.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, depending on how much funding you have, you're going to most likely want to have a larger field operation than you would a social media operation or a mailing operation. So just for some context, you're going to have about a 70% conversion rate, depending on your likability and your platform, from personal conversations with a voter and a canvasser versus a 2% conversion rate to votes for you from a mailer that you're sending out to voters. So make sure you're prioritizing field, do the other things, and keep your team manageable. So whatever you can afford, allocate a good portion of those funds to that small team. And if it is a small race, try and build some personal connections and get some volunteers out there as well.
One thing that I will say, just to butt up what Brian said, is that
I'm sorry, Dan. I'm Dan. It's okay.
To button up what Dan said, is that if you are a campaign that is having the internal conversation of what are we prioritizing and what we don't, especially a small campaign, I think that the answer is almost always to prioritize field. Field is what gives not only the edge to the voters that you talk to, field also gives the visual of a movement that field may precede the movement, right? But at least it has the visual that you have people out there, you have people on doors, there's momentum, you're engaging voters, and that really, the effect that has is just astonishing. I would always prioritize field on a small race, a small campaign over social media, over focusing on, obviously fundraising is always a focus, but things like press, right? I would always choose field over that.
Thank you. That helps.
You're welcome. Of course. Anybody else?
Yeah. This is Scott. I noticed that you use in the presentation the leapfrog technique for canvassing. I've had some success with having canvassers go in pairs, one side take one side of the street and the other take the other side of the street. Is there a reason you prefer leapfrog?
So it's pretty much the same thing, whether it be a canvasser at one door and then another canvasser at the other, and then they alternate, or from opposite sides of the street. I think that if you're just trying to go in, it's really depending on what your turf looks like and what area you're trying to hit. So if you're going to go all the way to the end of the street, maybe it's best to have one on either side, and then you can work your way up. But if you're going to have to come back down, you can have people on the same side and turn a corner. But yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. We just like to have our canvassers in pairs so that it boosts morale, and that it also they're in close proximity to each other. So they're for safety concerns, and also one canvasser might have skills that another might not have, such as them being bilingual, and they can always walk over to the next door and answer questions in a different language, or whatever other example. It's just more useful than having single people out there. But I think both techniques are pretty similar.
Yeah, really, I would just say that both are like different ways to execute the buddy system, but really the point is to make canvassers feel more supported and safe when they're out there. I think if canvassers feel better, they work better. And when the work is split up, even if you're giving bigger turfs that you're splitting and canvassers actually wind up hitting more doors than they would walking in individual smaller turf, that they just feel better about being with someone. And that is really what we emphasize when we say leapfrog. I think from a training standpoint, we start with the leapfrog technique and then tell canvassers, like, if you feel more comfortable with your partner after you get into a groove, you know, splitting streets, odds and evens, go ahead and do that. But I think it's just important to establish a culture in the team of working with a partner and working together is really the point of why we stress the leapfrog in our training.
Yeah, and then another minor point, say lit is running low on one person's end, you can always share until a director can get over there and get them more lit so that they can do their job canvassing more effectively. So there's a lot of benefits to having pairs.
All good points I've run into in the past, yes. And but yeah, I guess you're basically saying be adaptable.
Oh, absolutely. You know, field has to be adaptable. Field adapts not only day by day, not hour by hour. Field adapts minute by minute. You know, you're adapting to the fact that the opposition realized that you're on turf and now there's 20 volunteers chasing your canvassers around. You're adapting to the rolling thunderstorms that are now sending floods onto turf, right? Field is all about adapting. We have to take the same mentality to our debriefs and also the same mentality home to ourselves and saying what is working for us and what isn't. If on this turf, if in this geography, leapfrogging the doors isn't working, what am I going to do as a coach, as a trainer, to best support the canvasser with knowledge and techniques that will get the job done better for them? And that is all about adaptability. Field has to be malleable.
Yeah, and one other point that slightly related, using multiple tactics, not just field. Although we think that's most important in terms of getting out the vote. When you have a smaller team, you can only have them in so many locations at the same time, and you may want to cover a portion of your district and go out into another one instead of going from one portion to another person and having a more scattered effect. So what you could do is perhaps have some phone banking, call banking in different areas where canvassers aren't. So you can see if opposition is there, and then you can, you know, better address that issue in terms of where you're going out. So yeah, use as many tactics as you can.
Just one thing before I move on to this, just like button it up. Typically in life, like if something works on one day, we're going to want to do it again the next day. That conventional wisdom you have to throw that out the window in field. Because if something worked on one day, just common sense dictates that it's probably not going to work tomorrow because no day in field is the same, right? So I think that really building good programs and becoming better as directors is saying what worked today and what can I add to my tool belt that I can pull out in a situation where I need it, but not necessarily apply a given to tomorrow, that what worked today is going to lead us to our goal, right? I think that field operatives are the true political scientists. We test what works and what doesn't constantly, and we are constantly testing our own hypothesis. So I think that that's just a very important thing to add on to the end of your question.
And just to piggyback off of that, behind the screen here, this is Z again. A lot of you guys are going to be hiring field directors for your campaigns and field captains and team leads. And I think a really good piece of advice as somebody that's hired a lot of these folks in the past that I think you guys could take away from this is that being a good canvasser does not mean that you're a good captain or a good leader. I think that a lot of new folks that come into field, I was one of them. I know a lot of people that do this, where you see a really good canvasser and you immediately want to hire them as a captain. And I've got to say that's about 10% of the job is being a good canvasser. The other 90% of the job is the adaptability piece. So that's the reason why these guys have the job, and that's the reason why.
Hey, yo, look at Dan.
Oh, sorry, I'm just gonna mute whoever.
Yeah,
that's a big.
More questions?
Hi, this is Ab.
Sorry, hand raised. I'll go really quick. I think it's a quick question anyway. So last weekend was the first time we went out canvassing, and we have one campaign manager who's acting as our field op, and then a bunch of other people, part of our grassroots group, volunteered. This is more of a technical question. When you have people volunteering canvassing, can you still claim that you pay everybody that is working for your campaign because they are volunteers, or how does that work?
Yeah, you can definitely claim, I mean, unpaid volunteers, by definition, are volunteers because they're not being paid. But you can always say we pay everyone that we work, that is hired by us. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks.
There's somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, I had a question. So this is in relation to volunteer retention, and specifically I wanted to know what your insights were regarding retaining volunteers for the long term. If the election is not until 2022, so how do you recommend to keep them engaged with the campaign, so to speak? And then the second part would be, how soon before the election would you recommend starting to get out there and canvassing?
Okay, so to answer that last part of your question, as soon as possible.
Right.
Get out there as soon as possible, for all the reasons that we mentioned beforehand. You want to be out there first. You want to boost your name recognition first. You want to be the person that voters are seeing first. And you also can get data first that way too, so you know it's working. But volunteer operations, volunteers by nature are flaky. Most people, when they have to walk around for 5+ hours a day and talk to people, are going to flake at some point or want to break at some point. So I like to view it as making it as personal as possible with them. If you have a new volunteer or a new volunteer group, the candidate should go out there, make connections, you know, buy them drinks or dinner afterwards, beforehand, during shift, boost the morale as much as possible, and work with them on field. The other thing is, if they're really good and as your budget is increasing because you're doing more fundraising as the campaign is going on, consider hiring them. And then they're more likely to stick around, and maybe even getting a volunteer coordinator who can reach out to your personal connections and get as many volunteers as possible for you, so that in the case where you have volunteers flaking off, you can rely on others, and make sure that you're raising those funds that you can actually hire people. So regardless of whether or not volunteer flakes, you have somebody who you can rely on because you're paying.
One thing that I would like to say too is that in terms of volunteer retention, it is important to have actual things for your volunteers to buy into, right? Over the period of time that you're trying to cover, to get to the point where a campaign really, really kicks off, and we're really not questioning what we're doing every day because we're campaigning to win, because, you know, we're not at the point where we're necessarily running for our life yet. In that, you know, pre-stage, there should be things for them to buy into. There should be events that they can come and work and staff. There should be, you know, phases to a canvas. You know, maybe you're not canvassing as aggressively as you would, like in the height of that, you know, silly season when things are really tense and people are out there, you're out there on the streets with your opposition. But if there's any kind of field component, you should build that into a program that people can buy into and feel like they're a part of something. Because I don't think that any of us have ever really felt a part of something that we are just a member of by name or by connection, or quote unquote card carrying member of. I think that if we want to engage volunteers on the long term, we have to actually go out and engage them and give them something to buy into. So that's just, I think, a major part of maintaining volunteers and retaining them. Really is also tied into culture, and maintaining a culture that says there is work to be done here. Come out, come get some good work done, because that is really one of those situations where if you build it, they'll come. You just have to build it, right? And they'll actually come out and stay.
Yeah, and just to add one last thing to what Ryan said, I mentioned just before, prioritize your personal connections.
Right.
These campaigns, they're won by name recognition. Mainly, if you have enough of it, people are going to vote for you, unless your opponent has a really good field game and their platform is better than yours, then they are most likely going to win. But name recognition is really important. In addition to that, your personal connections are going to be your most reliable people, whether that be for volunteering or whether that be for fundraising, because you can call them and ask them to donate. whatever it is, you want to maybe make a list of all the people in your contacts on your phone that you can trust, and make commitments minimal at first. Say, hey, can you come out for an hour or two, not 5 or 10? Have them do what they're most comfortable with. So don't turn a volunteer down because they don't want to go out on the field with you. Maybe get some phone numbers for them to call if they're more comfortable with that. Yeah, democratize the labor.
Awesome. Any other questions? Give it a couple seconds. I don't know if there's anything.
Yeah, you can check the chat.
Let's see.
Well, this meeting was recorded, so we can send out slides to you and also a link to rewatch this in your personal time, and also reach out to us, email us with any questions you think of afterwards. We're happy to help.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. And we hope you have a great night.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Good luck on your campaigns.
Good luck.
Bye.